back to Going Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and today in this Kickstarter preview series, I'm excited to dive into Werewolf: The Apocalypse Retaliation from Flyos Games. This is landing on Kickstarter for November 15th, and if you'll join me, we're going to go through in this video the setup, which is going to show you how to build a character within this RPG universe in a box, and then we're going to dive into the very first full-fledged scenario from the game, which will show you all the different aspects of its design, how it flows and operates. It's also worth mentioning, if you're familiar with Flyos Games, they put out and are currently releasing a game called Vampire Chapters, which I did cover in a prototype form in the past. So if you want to see one of their previous design efforts around an RPG in the box and how I believe they literally nailed that design, having amazing dialogue, narrative, as well as the combat being mixed in too, where Vampire Chapters really focused on the narrative, Werewolf: The Apocalypse Retaliation really starts to dig in around the combat, and it's very dynamic. Your character can morph and change, of course, into a werewolf through a number of stages with varying abilities and some cons that come along with some of those stages as well. And that's really what makes the combat stand out in this one, which you're going to see in gameplay videos to come. So without further ado, let's dive into the setup, create a character, get the scenario on the table, and we're going to dive in and see what Werewolf: The Apocalypse is all about. Werewolf: The Apocalypse Retaliation is a co-op game where you play as a member of a pack of werewolves, powerful and righteous warriors that fight to protect Gaia from the corruption of the Wyrm. You can play the game solo or with friends as a pact, and if you're playing solo, you're going to add allies into the fray to help you during this scenario. And while you do not have to be accompanied by allies, you can actually play true solo with no allies whatsoever. The game will always refer to you as a pack. The campaign of Retaliation is divided into scenarios. Each scenario has its own objectives, challenges, and unique story elements. The pack will navigate through the campaign by playing a series of scenarios and completing their objectives, and your progression throughout each scenario won't be linear. Based on your choices, successes, and failures, the scenario may resolve in vastly different ways. Similarly, the campaign itself will also offer you choices, sometimes allowing you to choose which scenarios out of 2 or more to play next. Failing a scenario is always a possibility, and when it happens, you lose everything you have gained while playing the scenario: items, effect cards, tokens, and you have to start over. In some instances, the game may tell you to proceed to another scenario despite having failed the previous one. When this happens, instructions in the scenario booklet will tell you what to do with the cards you've acquired during the scenario you failed. The choices you made during a scenario will have consequences in the future, impacting the overarching plot. The choices you made when you created your character and the way they evolve during the campaign will impact the actual story, and this makes every playthrough look and feel different, creating a unique adventure arc for each pack. The very first step of setup is to create your character. Within Retaliation, you create a unique player character. You get to decide where they come from, what they look like, their background, and how you want to actually play them. And character creation is done in 6 major steps. We're going to go through all those steps in just a moment. The first thing we're going to do when we're playing solo, and I'm creating just one character, in this example, I'll take one of these dashboards. A character board holds vital components for a pack member as well as their current state. We're going to walk through the creation of a character right now. The first step is to select our Garo forms, and of course, werewolves being shapeshifters, they can assume the appearance of a human, a wolf, or something resembling the mix of the two, and these are called Homid, Lupus, and Krynos, respectively. Now, during the game, you will be able to shapeshift into the form that best suits your needs, and of course, there'll be specific abilities, pros and cons between each of these stages. From the pool of illustration cards that you have across all 3 different forms, you'll select one of each of those form cards, placing them in your character dashboard. It's also worth mentioning that besides having a unique appearance, each form has a different set of abilities and restrictions. A shorthand version of them are written on the backs of these cards, so we will show you them later on. And it's also worth mentioning you're going to want to find the corresponding miniature for each of these 3 forms and place them on the dashboard as well. Here's a look at the miniatures for each of the 3 forms. I'm also going to take them off for a quick second. I'll flip these cards over so you get an idea as to what's on the back side of them. Within this form, we can use weapons, we can initiate a dialogue with an NPC. Over here, we can add rage dice to skill checks. We can ignore 2 damage per attack. And in this stage on the far right, we're able to gain more movement during our turn, gain the ability to be more successful at stealth checks, and to initiate a dialogue with Wolf and other NPCs. Next, we're going to select our auspice, which is the phase of the moon under which the Garou was born. If your tribe represents your goal, then your auspice represents how the Garou represents their goals, as well as how their overall role in Garou society. Now, auspices are represented by a card you insert into your character dashboard, which you will see. Details of them are on the front in short form and the ability on the back as well. Inside of the rulebook, there is more information around each of these selections. With the abilities now revealed, from left to right, we have +3 successes during a stealth check, recovering 2 willpower, +3 dice to any check, +3 rage, and -2 corruption to you and an ally in range of 2 hex. The one I'm going to choose for my play will be this one on the far left, Moon Given Moment. And now a quick look at the dashboard as we take our selection and place it in one of the 3 different slits across the top of the character dashboard. When you're in the final version of the game, you'll be taking this card and putting it straight up and down vertical into the dashboard, which will easily be visible for you. However, for this video, I'm going to lay them flat down on the table and not insert them in the dashboard to make sure you can actually see them at all times. Also, down along the bottom here, there is no rhyme or reason to the order, so I've gone ahead and actually swapped a couple around so it goes from human all the way up to werewolf. Now we move on to selecting our tribe, which is an important part of our identity, although not as influential as the auspice. Now, auspices define most of how you behave and act. Tribes are associated with a cause that you join or what you think Gaia has in store for them. Each tribe has an associated patron spirit, which grants them special powers known as gifts and may open up certain choices for you during the campaign. And on the backside of each of these tribe cards, there's a full description of each tribe and what it brings to the table. Out of these, I'm going to choose this one in the top left-hand corner. For my tribe, I've selected the Ghost Council, and if you wish, you can pause the screen in order to read the backstory of the Ghost Council and what that tribe stands for. The next step of setup is around backstories or backgrounds, and you're going to be defining where your character comes from using these cards. They grant you a special bonus due to the reflection of their life experience, and as you play through the campaign, those backstory specific choices, you are going to be able to discover the life of your character and how they led it prior to the game. Now, as you just saw on the prior side of the card, you had your skill advantage showing your background name, and on this side, you see the description of each one of these backgrounds. For me, I'm going to choose this one right here in the middle. Again, you can pause the screen if you wish to read it, and on the opposite side, I'll show you, I've chosen the backstory of the astronomer. Here's a look at my character dashboard after the selections that we've made and the things we've gained by the selections we've made, and we're not done making our unique character yet. We're now going to transition to the character sheet where we even further flesh out this unique character. Here's a look at the character sheet, and this sheet is going to track the evolution of your character, specifically in terms of their raw talent and their proficiencies, and these are measured across attribute and skill levels, which you can see below there. At the very top of this page is the name. We'll be placing a name in there for my character as well. Now, just to talk specifically about attributes, you have physical and you have mental. So your character's general ease with the type of task is defined by an attribute. The attribute level determines the number of black dice you're going to roll when making skill checks. The more dice, the higher the chances of success, of course. So physical is based on a character's general physical ability, so strength, dexterity, stamina. And if you're talking about mental, it's going to be intelligence, wits, and resolve. Skills are a character's level of expertise in different areas, and all skills are linked to an attribute. So you'll easily see that these skills right here relate to physical, and these skills here relate to mental. And when we're actually placing our checks inside of each of these boxes to create our character, from the very beginning, we're allotted 3 in one attribute and 2 in another. So I've selected to have 2 in physical and 3 in mental. And then from the underlying skills on either side, we get to select 2 that have 1 point and 2 that have 2 points. And I did that on both sides of the skill set for each attribute. Now, XP is also captured on the character sheet, and attributes and skill levels can be increased during the campaign by spending XP. And XP, of course, is earned by completing a scenario or just by reaching different goals within the scenario. So you write down all your XP you gain at the bottom of the character sheet, and of course, once you spend it, you'll allot it as you want between the different attributes and skills of your choosing. Now we move along to the initiative token, and we simply place an initiative token next to the player board based on the color of that player board. So underneath these cards, you'll see that it is yellow, so I've matched it up with the initiative token, and that is going to give us the speed and reaction of the character and defines the turn order during the main sequence and combat sequence of the game, which you will see set up later on. At this point, we need to fill our player board with trackers, which are going to lock out specific numbers off of the board based on, in this case, for damage, the attribute physical. So we take a look at the physical attribute, which I allocated 2 points to, or 2 levels to, and then based on a chart which is inside the rulebook, it tells us the maximum damage that we can take is going to be 6, so everything beyond 6 is then locked, which you can see here. Next up, we take a look at the willpower track, and I've gone ahead and locked out specific numbers for this. Again, very similar inside the rulebook based on the number of levels that I've obtained for mental, which is over here with 3. That gives me 6 on the willpower track, so everything beyond 6 gets locked out. And as you'd likely expect, when you spend XP to increase your mental attribute, you're going to be able to unlock corresponding slots on your willpower tracker. So this will change over the course of your gameplay. As you can see, I've gone ahead and placed out some trackers. We placed the rage tracker on spot number 2 where it is circled. And for the other ones, I placed them off to the side for now as we haven't accumulated any damage or willpower. And corruption starts at 0. Now, corruption is going to show how much a character is succumbing to the Wyrm's influence, which is certainly not a good thing. And of course, the rage tracker is a primal anger, which is granted to the character. It allows them to perform great deeds at the risk of losing control. A very cool mechanic within the game. The next major step of setup is to go ahead and create the combat decks for each of the 3 major forms across your player dashboard, which are easily constructed by basically taking a look at the card backs, which you can see an example of one here, and it states base deck. That means this one is going to go into every single deck, no matter what, but then you're going to also see, with a similar card back for that particular form, cards that look like this, that might have a level depicted as well as a skill depicted. You'll take a look at your skills and determine if you're at that level. In this case, I do have 1 level in stealth. I actually have 2. So I'm going to be able to take this card as well as any additional cards that are also level 1 stealth or level 2 stealth and add them into my deck. I'm going to do this across all 3 forms until I have 3 form specific decks for combat all built. So as an example here, taking a look at the deck that I've created for the very first form, we have some base deck cards, which are going to show up in every single deck, but very soon we'll start to see some level cards that are specific to skills that I have, and I've only included the ones that I actually have at this form level, and they're inside this combat deck, which now is going to reside underneath of this area here for this specific form. And I'm going to do this across all 3 of those forms. So once you have all 3 of your combat decks built out based on the base deck cards as well as all of the cards that relate to the skills up to the levels you've acquired on your character sheet, you're going to have 3 form decks here. And just to close the loop on why you have the 3 form decks is, again, your character can morph between these different forms throughout the gameplay, which will restrict which combat deck you're able to use at a given time. If we happen to be in this form, we have to use this deck, this form, this deck, and so on. Next up, we have gifts, and your character is going to gain these based on supernatural abilities that tie to a tribe, for instance, the Ghost Council, or the Auspice, which we've chosen, which comes with 2 options, of which we have to select one of them. The gift which comes from the tribe is Adept, and it says, for as long as you look with your eyes, you'll miss everything else. Once per scenario, you can reroll a failed occult check. It's free, and the type is immediate. And then over here for the Auspice, we have 2 different gifts we can choose from, and they do different things, cost similar, and they're a similar type as well. And that, my friends, is a successful build of a character from start to finish. At this point, we're able to begin the campaign by setting up the scenario components on the game board. Here is a look at the Caern board. This is a sacred place to the Geru and is the connection to the Umbra, the spirit world, which is stronger here. It is also where your pack's going to go in between scenarios to rest and prepare for your future missions. And as such, the Caern is ever present in the pack's mind. Now, this board is represented and contains many key information points on the current context of the story. It's also going to evolve throughout the campaign according to the pack's achievements, and the Caern board is always on the table. One of the many upgrades that the Caern can get during the campaign are buildings. I've placed these 4 tokens to the left-hand side of the board for now. These places will help the pack to better prepare for the mission ahead. From top to bottom, we have the armory, barracks, fortifications, and infirmary. The next aspect of the board to be aware of is the rank tracker, which is along the bottom in red. And this is the Garrou's rank, which represents where they fit in the hierarchy of their society. The higher the rank, the more important their role is. Each pack member in play has the same rank, which will increase during the campaign after they prove their usefulness to the pack. The higher the rank, it will unlock new gifts, as spirits will be more inclined to teach you. When you begin your campaign, you'll start rank 0, so nothing to track for the moment. Let's move along to patron spirits here. We have 4 of them visibly showing here, but there's another 4 on the opposite side of each of these tokens. From top to bottom, we have the rat, the frog, the owl, and the fox. On the opposite side, you'll find spider, falcon, the hare, and the bear. And you're going to want to try and acquire these because you might be able to get help from them. And when they join you, they grant bonuses to the pack overall. And when you gain one of these, you place the token in one of the corresponding slots on the game board itself. Round trackers are used to keep track of the passage of time, so keep an orange and black cube nearby to make use of this track on the board. The moon phase tracker keeps track of the current phase of the moon, which has a great influence on the Garrou. Since their auspice is determined by the phase of the moon they are born under, the phase of the moon influences the Garrou's potential like tides. You'll find yourself being asked to change the moon phase at regular intervals throughout the campaign, and you'll do this by placing the associated token on the correct side in the center of the board. At the start of the campaign, place the moon phase tracker on the new moon, the Regabash auspice. A few other things to mention around the Caern board is that at the very top there is a slit very similar to the player board. However, in this particular location, you're going to find things like the story Caern cards and the random Caern cards that you're going to encounter throughout your campaign, which are going to throw some checks and narratives at you that are going to allow you to make choices, which are going to have impacts on your gameplay. You're also going to be able to potentially get trophies out of these. Trophies are used as a currency within the game to allow you to go to the merchant and purchase items, another whole aspect of the game. All of this being centralized around this game board. Now we're going to move into the next major step of setup, which is to head into the storybook, and we will be skipping past the campaign introduction, but I am going to show you the scenario layout for this, as well as the introduction narrative here that you can read, and I'll also show you the conclusion of this as we're going to actually set up for scenario number 1. For those interested in reading the narrative, remembering again that this is in prototype form and is all subject to change, this will give you an idea as to the campaign introduction leading into scenario number 1. Here's a look at the campaign introduction conclusion. You can find the narrative here. You'll also see that we gained some XP for each of our characters, and we're ready now to move to scenario number 1. Here's a look at scenario number 1. You'll see the introduction up top. I'll zoom in on that in a second so you'll have a chance to read it. You'll find the objective in the middle as well as the action in terms of reading event page E1. And then we have optional scenario goals as well, dialogue NPCs down along the side, and how to set up the scenario itself on the table. For those interested in reading the narrative of scenario number 1, here's an up-close shot. You can also see the objective here is to find Quell near the Asher's root. And the optional scenario goals here say to make Hassan an ally, you get 1 XP each, and make 1 sneak attack, you get a trophy. Here's a look at scenario 1's 2 tiles placed side by side. We're now going to fill it up with all the terrain, NPCs, and other aspects of the scenario. Scenario number 1 is all set up. I can either come in my Homid form, which is my human form, or I can come in my wolf or lupus form. I have a choice between the two, and you might want to take a look at this scenario to see what you plan to interact with dialogue-wise. Here we have some thorns, and in terms of the tokens that you're seeing around the game board, we have obstacle tokens here in the darker tone, and we also have difficult terrain tokens with the 2 difficult terrain icons, and then we have what are known as action tokens, which are right here. They have the lightning bolts 1 and 2. At the very far back, we have an investigation area token, so something of interest back there. This right here, this is going to be a route that is inside of that back half, and it's also worth mentioning there should be another terrain token right here that looks like this, right in this position. I ran out for the prototype, but I'll be moving one from over here back there once we get to that side of the scenario. But beyond that, we're going to get into more details around what these are and how I can interact with them in part number 1 of the playthrough. But in terms of setup of this scenario here, everything's in place. I decided to actually change it up and go with my lupus form instead. So it's going to have me coming in as a wolf, and this gives me access to additional movement, successes during stealth checks, and also allowing me to initiate dialogue with wolves or other lupine NPCs. And just to wrap up this setup, I want to talk about a number of other game components that are going to come in handy and are worth keeping within easy reach around the game table. First off are the state cards. You'll have a deck of these. Keep them close by. You might be called upon to put them into play. For NPCs that are currently not in combat with you, you'll have them with their backs facing up. We'll place those in play as we go through the game. We also have here a reference card for the main sequence, combat sequence, and rage. We have our dice, additional tokens here, some tokens off screen as well. And you'll want to make sure you have the booklet, which is specific to the scenario you're playing, because that will be called upon to read from as the story basically unfolds as you move through the scenario. As an example, for scenario number 1, we saw as an action during setup on the page, it said to read event page E1. Well, that E1 page is coming from the scenario specific booklet to find out more about the scenario and the story we've gotten ourselves into. And that, my friends, is going to wrap up the setup video for Werewolf the Apocalypse Retribution from Flyos Games. Really hope you enjoyed this look at building a unique character within the game world and also setting up our very first scenario. We did jump over the campaign introduction, doing so in order to jump a little bit deeper into the experience past those introductory scenarios, which are going to be great the first time you get the final product, learning about the mechanisms within the game. But for this preview, we're going to jump into scenario number 1. We're going to open up that booklet in the top right hand corner and check out E1, which is event 1, and follow through the story to see what's going on as we try to complete our main objective and potentially even some optional side ones as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you think of it so far, and as always, keep on rolling solo.